right. So, I mean, to be perfectly honest, we could do many classes of drawing and practicing form of character and, doing proportions and, drawing characters and working with color and other kinds of aspects. Okay. One class really isn't enough. Even 1 week is not enough. But hopefully, you're taking some time to practice some of these skills on your own, using Adobe Animate as a tool to help you draw. Feel free to use things like tablets or, drawing tablets, Wacom tablets to help you with the drawing process. Um, let's talk a little bit about character design. Okay. I have a friend of mine who she does character design for animations. One of them just got released by Netflix. I forgot the name of it, but it's she was doing character design. And there's no magic formula to character design, but there's a couple of things to consider. Um, these are some general, just kind of tidbits. One is form and construction. One is aesthetics, distinction, personality, originality, audience definition, exaggeration, color scheme, and of course, solid drawing. Okay. So forming construction is thinking about the character. How many legs are there? How many arms are there? Does it have an oversized head? Does it have oversized arms? Maybe they're very strong and they have big, thick, kind of Popeye level arms or something like that. Maybe they have a very small head for some reason. They're very petite or they're very fragile as a character. These are things to consider. So all of these really kind of plays into um, aspects. So it's like, here's some character sheets, and it's like, this is Tex Avery, who did a lot of stuff uh for Warner Brothers, and you can see it's like, he starts off and it's like, okay, there's a nose and big nose, teeth, only just two little teeth here, bigger, very big tail. I mean, look how big his tail is in relationship to the form. He draws the characters in different ways to get a sense of like how the character works. This is Michigan J Frog, who, was another character that Warner Brothers worked on. They show the character from different positions, different, poses to get an idea of what it might look like. Aesthetics are really like, what does it look like? And a lot of things can go into that. Some of it might be thicker lines versus thinner lines. So if I draw big, thick lines, that feels very different than if the character has kind of thinner lines. Are you using cross hatching, speckling, dotted? What are the color choices? Gradients versus cross hatching to do shading. Do you have any shading? All of these kind of play into the aesthetics. Are using more curved lines, angled lines? Some designs are very angular, some of them are more curved. um, you know, Disney has a lot of curves in their lines. You don't usually typically get more angular, whereas Hanna-Barbera has more of a thicker, more angled lines here. As you can kind of see, it's like very angled, thicker lines. Distinction, this has more to do with just like the thought of what does the character look like. Having the character stand out in any way. If all your characters look the same, it's hard to tell them apart. So having something that makes them distinct, that could be, Popeye has a very big face, and his pipe literally doesn't even come out of his mouth. It's like comes from the side of his face, which is like, in terms of physics, that's impossible. But of course, it's a cartoon, so you can do whatever you want. But it's like, it's kind of a distinct figure. Obviously, he has weird forearms that are bigger than his body and that kind of stuff. So all of these kind of go into the character design. You know, things flowing like Wile E. Coyote's big floppy nose or his floating ears, Roadrunner's tongue and giant eyes. All of these kind of go into making the characters feel very distinct and not like you're just repeating something. Personality, I always kind of do a thing of, I think about someone who has a lot of personality in your own life. Okay. This could be someone who's very loud, or someone that people are sort of, maybe your friends or your family are just naturally drawn to. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's someone on TV, like a Kim Kardashian type character or whatever. It's like they have personality, right? It might be the way they talk, it may be the way they move their hands, it may be the way that they make facial expressions, but it makes you interested in them. Okay. And that's what you want your character probably to have, because you're telling a story, right? And you want your characters to be interesting to people. So how do you give them personality? Is it a way they make their face? Is it a color scheme? Is it the clothing they wear? They wear some sort of weird outfit, or their hairstyle. All of these can reflect a different personality, you know? Like here in this Joker, his smile is very kind of off-putting. All these lines in his face kind of make him very off-putting. Here, this is John Kay of Ren and Stimpy fame. His characters definitely are a lot simpler in terms of, like, there's not a lot of lines, but there's a lot of form. So like this character's butt gets all weird here, and it's like, his torso is kind of moving in a way that's kind of odd. This character is almost like an S shape here, right? It's like, kind of like that. And then you got Grandpa here with a big head, things like that. Originality, sometimes just having a unique drawing style. Once again, South Park characters do not feel like characters from The Simpsons, even if they were using the same color scheme. It just wouldn't feel the same. Like, this is Super Jail. They have a very distinct way of drawing their characters. All of these make the characters feel unique. Audience definition is thinking about who is realistically the audience for your character. So this has really more to do with storytelling. But what I mean by that is, if your character, let's say, is aimed at young children, ages, 3 to 6, you're probably going to want the character to be more friendly. Usually parents frown on having dark, disturbing pictures given to their 5-year-old. So that usually means, like, Wubsy, I think is the name of the character. And it's like, there's lots of, like, there's no sharp edges, lots of curves, usually not a lot of complexity in the character. Like, there's not a lot of shading, the line, very friendly, lots of facial, simple, friendly faces, compare and contrast that with a more darker. So this is like an anime. I don't know what anime this is from. Please, feel free to email me if you know what it is. But it's like, this character feels very dark. And it's not even just like the color scheme, although that's part of it. But it's like the thicker lines, the off-putting smile. It doesn't feel as sort of cutesy, so to speak, as the Wubsy character does. Okay, and the simplicity of the design, there's a cuteness that is good for a cute storyline, but wouldn't work well if you're doing a more serious story. There are some animes where the stories are fairly serious. They have, violence and sex and whatever in them. So it would be weird to have a more cutesy style. You might want to have a more realistic style of drawing, or a more realistic style of character, or a more gritty style of character. That's, Super Jail is a pretty gritty cartoon, and so their drawing style has a sort of grittiness to it that doesn't appear in the same way that a Wubsy cartoon or Hello Kitty or something like that might be. Exaggeration really is kind of just the idea of, like, exaggerating features. So Bugs Bunny as a character doesn't really have proportions of an actual bunny. Like, first of all, Bugs Bunny is a biped, meaning he walks on 2 legs, and real bunnies don't walk on 2 legs. They walk on all fours. So there's that. Also, if you look at how big his ears are, real bunnies, I mean, they have big ears, but these are definitely exaggerated for, stylistic purposes. Obviously, the torso is made smaller, all these things to make the character more visually interesting. you know. And I think the character is a visually interesting character. The ears are kind of fun, the giant feet, the more human style stance of being posed, you know. Just to give you an idea, once again, we talked about proportions. Humans are about 8 heads high, 7.5 heads high. So if you measured it, you know, it'd be about 7 heads high from here to here. Beavis of Beavis and Butthead, he's like 3 heads high. You know, his body, if you do out the proportions, is like about 3/7 of the height. So it's like his head is way larger than a normal head would be. And that's part of the design. And that's part of what makes his character kind of more cartoonish and interesting and less realistic. You know, if you wanted the character to be a more serious story, I don't know if that would really work with this very eccentric style of character. You know what I mean? His arms are a little bit his legs are definitely too short. And I think that's on purpose. I don't, you know, Mike, I don't, you'd have to talk to Mike Judd, who designed the characters, but it's like his legs feel a little stubby because they're not, his torso should really be about there, you know? So obviously exaggeration is always used in cartoons, you know, whether it's giant eyes and mouth or, you know, giant tails or whatever to make the character just more interesting. Here, obviously, it's just exaggeration of the eyes and whatnot. Color schemes, you can take the same character and play around with color. Um, Different colors. You know, there's warm colors and cool colors. Warm colors typically make your character feel happier and friendlier. Cooler colors, warm colors are like, you know, red, orange, yellow. Cooler colors like blue, purple, green typically make the character feel more sullen, more tranquil, you know, things like that. So like here, these are all the same character, but they're colored in different ways. So this one has more of kind of a cooler color scheme. This one has kind of a little more of a warmer color scheme. There's a lot of orange and red and this kind of hair or whatever it is, appendages. And then this kind of, you know, once again, I'm not quite sure what this is, kind of like, you know, skin, I guess I'll call it, versus this one that feels a little cooler. You know, this one feels a little friendlier than this one, not by much, partly because the teeth are kind of. So if I wanted my character to be a little more off-putting, maybe the blue one or this blue and purple color scheme might work a little better. Facial expressions, always important. The face is really you know, eyes and mouth, as they always say, are the window to the soul, meaning like your eyes and mouth dictate how people interpret the personality and the demeanor of your character. So like sullen, you know, here, Droopy Dog, he's got kind of this sullen face, droopy ears, you know. I don't know this character's name, but like the sinister nose and smile with the big old twirly mustache, kind of sinister, pointing in the eyes. Here it's like giant wide eyes, like literally wide, right? So she's very like naive or you know, playful, you know, big mouth. Solid drawing is, you know, this is solid drawing is the idea that your characters feel like they have depth to them. Now we talked about depth earlier, but this is a little different. So what depth would be is like, well, if I'm gonna have, let's say he's wearing a hat, right? So I could draw the hat of my character like this, but that feels kind of flat because it's literally like a triangle that's, you know, going into, you know, the pointing towards the camera. So if I drove the hat more like this, where there's like kind of a little more, see that this feels a little more solid, even though it's not like I've really added a lot, but the way that the lines are and you see how this kind of angles in a little bit and this kind of plays off. So it gives it a sense of depth to it. And that's really what solid drawing is about, which is like, even though Mickey is a two-dimensional character, the way that Mickey is drawn with, you know, here, this arm is coming before the body. So that's like overlapping, right? And then the torso is coming in front of here. So this is giving the sense that this arm is kind of out a little bit, you know. And then his torso. So his like foot is like here, and that's pointing. So there's a lot going on here to give the sense that, you know, of three-dimensional depth for Mickey. Same thing here. It's like this hat is kind of tipped in a little bit. The drapery here gives a sense of three-dimensional depth. Like there's like, you know, it just makes the character feel a little more the way the toes are pointing, you know, they're not just like literally flat to the camera. Like they're not just some people like draw feet, they draw them like literally to the side like that. Here it's like really when people stand, their feet sort of come out more kind of like that. That makes sense. You know, here it's like the drapery is giving this sense of 3D-ness. And it's not even that hard. It's not even like a lot. It's really just some simple addition lines can really add a lot of depth to your character. All right, so all of these are just kind of, you know, little tidbits, little thoughts about what you can do to make your characters a little more interesting. These are some model sheets that kind of show like, okay, this is what the character would look like from different, you know, perspectives. Front view, usually they like to do a front view, back view, so you can see if he has like a tail or something. 3/4 view, so they're kind of like facing this way. So the face is like this, ear, ear, you know, hair would be like there. All right, so hopefully that's kind of helpful, give you ideas to how to draw a more advanced character and doing that within Adobe Animate.